on corporate advisory and all legal angles related to startups with over 15 years of experience. Ma'am is somebody who is our go-to person for all things startups. Thank you so much for joining in, ma'am. And we will now be handing over the stage to you.
Ashwin, thanks a lot. Thanks for the introduction. Hello, everybody. This is Vidyut here. As Rishvin introduced, I'm the co-founder of a Bangalore-based boutique law firm called Tree of Life Associates, and I predominantly deal with startups and startup-related issues and advisory to startups. So today, as he mentioned, is the part 2 session on another very important topic, which is ESOPs. And, we will briefly discuss what ESOPs are and how startups can benefit by rolling out ESOPs to their employees, even at an early stage, irrespective of the stage at which, a startup is. So the format that we are following is Rishwin will ask a few pertinent questions to which I will respond. So it's a bit of a Q&A. The format will help everybody understand the concepts better.
Correct, ma'am. Beginning the session, we have the very first question for you. What essentially are ESOPs and why are we discussing these today?
So ESOPs are basically employee stock options. This is basically, an employee incentive plan, which is rolled out not just by startups, by any company, whether it's India or abroad. And the way that it is designed is basically incentivizing employees to, sort of invest in the future and the growth of the company. Once the employee invests by staying on longer, the way that the employee is rewarded is by giving them stock or ownership in the company. Finally, at the end of the day, anybody who's an owner of any number of shares in the company feels personally committed. So the idea behind ESOPs is basically to get employees to commit towards overall growth of the company by giving them shares in the company. So that is typically the concept of, ESOPs or, different kind of schemes, that come under the entire umbrella of ESOPs. So in a nutshell, that is ESOP, employee stock option plan is the full form of ESOP. Yeah.
Ma'am, generally at what stage of the life cycle of a startup do you think ESOPs are to be rolled out? At times people are confused whether they should begin with ESOPs or they should, reach a certain pinnacle after which they start rolling out ESOPs.
Right. So if you notice, most of the companies who, very early stage, honestly, maybe the employees will not be able to see the benefit of ESOP because very early stage startups do not have the kind of traction in the market, and therefore, it is very difficult to understand what their share prices would look at, right? I mean, look like. Now, when one looks at companies like, for instance, Flipkart or Razorpay or Zomato or Unacademy, all of these people who have recently actually done a buyback of ESOP shares from employees, you'll understand that the size of the startup is significantly large. Plus, it has been able to raise significant funding over the course of years. So therefore, if you ask me what is the right time, I think the right time would be, whatever the startup's business is, a proof of concept is rolled out. And maybe you've got some initial investor who's able to show some interest in the company. That's when the founders can start thinking about what their ESOP plans are going to look like. And maybe reserve a certain percentage towards ESOP. So probably that's the time, because, that's the time when you're going to be creating some kind of valuation for the company. It's a very good time to share that valuation maybe with the initial employees, whether it's senior management or the junior management, to show them what the roadmap looks like. So it doesn't look like ESOP is just on paper, but looks like a genuine employee incentivization plan.
All right. Okay. That makes sense. Moving on, ma'am, the next question is, what are the different types of employee incentives that can be offered?
Well, the most common type is obviously employee stock option plan. So the way it typically works is employees are offered options. These are not shares upfront. This is an option to apply for a share after the expiry of a particular period of time. That particular period of time is typically called as a vesting period. over the course of a certain amount of vesting period, which can be anything between 2 to 4 years is a standard vesting period. So let's say the day one, you are allotted 100 options which will convert over the course of 4 years into a right to apply for 100 shares of the company. Okay, so today they are called options. Over the vesting, once the shares are vested, then at the end of the vesting period, something called as exercise. Exercise means the employee has a right to apply for the shares of the company. The company will issue them shares at whatever price the company determines, which is the exercise price, and the employee then becomes a shareholder of the company. Okay, so that is your employee stock option plan. Sometimes, there are something called as restricted stock. So in restricted stock, what happens is that shares are allotted upfront, but they're subject to certain restrictions. One of the restrictions, again, is a vesting period. So I may be a shareholder today, but I cannot exercise my right as a shareholder until and unless a certain amount of time has expired. And not just time, there are certain probably deliverables or certain goals that are set. And I've been able to achieve a certain goal. That's when the restrictions start lifting. Once the restrictions are entirely lifted, then I become a shareholder of the company like any other. So that's restricted stock options. And then something called as phantom stock. Now, phantom stock is not actual stock. Phantom stock, by the very verbiage or terminology or nomenclature that is used, is not actual stock, but there's an underlying value as to stock. So again, I give you, let's say, 100 phantom stock. I say after 4 years, I will give you the money equivalent of what the share price is on that day. So phantom stock, typically, listed companies do roll out phantom stock. Yeah. So there's a phantom. There's not a real stockholder position, but there's an underlying value to that stock option which is linked to the price of the shares. So that way, it becomes a cash incentive at the end of the day and is treated as perquisite in the hands of the employees, as is, even shares or stock options for that matter. But what you get is cash equivalent, the underlying value of which is linked to the shares of the company. So that is called as phantom stock. So there are startups that, maybe some of the initial startups feel that we may not want to, have actual stockholder relationship with the employees initially, and they might roll out a phantom stock plan to be able to do that. So yeah. So these are the basic types of ESOP. There are a whole lot of others, Rishman, like restricted stock units and stock appreciation rights and all, but these are not typically commonly used in India. If you ask me, the most commonly used, stock option plan is the employee stock option plan. The first one that I had mentioned, those are most commonly used, and those are regulated by the company law as well.
All right. Okay, ma'am. And what are the basic documents that need to be created for allotment of the ESOPs to the employees?
So if founders are looking at creating an ESOP plan for their company, they should definitely, take advice from a lawyer to create what is called as an ESOP plan, the employee stock option plan. The plan will actually set out the terms and conditions on which the shares will be granted or the options will be granted to employees. It will also probably categorize the type of employees who will initially be eligible. So there are some companies who initially want to roll out stock options only to senior management and not to every employee, because obviously senior management, probably need a larger incentive, and plus they've put in a certain amount of time in the company. So maybe some companies want to do that. So the plan will set out those modalities. So you've got your employee stock option plan. Then there's something called as an employee stock option agreement, which every employee will have to sign. This agreement will bind the employee contractually on the options he or she gets from the company. So these two documents are absolutely critical. And my advice to all the startups would be that the minute startups start talking to employees about ESOPs, get these documents created. Don't push it to the later date, because one of the things that I've commonly seen is some of the early stage startups promise ESOPs, sometimes go as far as including them in the employment contract as well. But there's never really there's never really a stock option plan. There's never really a stock option agreement. And all you have is something under your employment contract, which really does not translate into anything. So if you're really serious about employee stock option plan, putting these documents in place becomes absolutely critical, and one must do that. Yeah. So these are the basic documents. Yeah.
Right. So looping this back to the previous concept, in the case of phantom stocks, for example, I believe that, and please correct me if my assumption is wrong, the number of documents and the efforts which will go behind issuing phantom stocks, so to say, will be far lesser as compared to regular options or restricted stock. Just basis the fact that there are actually no stocks which are either being issued or being transferred, right?
Strict as for an employee stock option plan. Plus, again, phantom stock is not regulated by law, it's purely contractual. While employee stock options are entirely regulated by company law, and one will have to adhere to company law also in terms of creating the plan, including your shareholder resolutions, your special resolutions, all of those kind of things. So yes, in a certain sense, phantom stock is easier to create. But look at it this way: phantom stock is, as the name, as the name is, it's phantom stock. So unless there's great value upfront itself to the shares, employees will not see the benefit. While an employee may think that today maybe the share value is not that high, but I believe that in 4 years I will get a fantastic value for the shares, and I'll be a shareholder with the company. Look at the
Correct.
kind of the recent acquisition, like Walmart acquired Flipkart, right? So when Walmart acquired Flipkart, one of the things that Flipkart did was also a buyback of ESOP shares. What does that mean? That the company bought back the ESOP shares from the employees, and they gave
Mhm.
them 3x the value that they had paid whilst acquiring the share. So if, let's say, 10 rupees is the exercise price, I got my sale price at 30 rupees. So the employees, made a windfall gain. I think Razorpay also recently, Misho, some of these, Unacademy, as I told you, all of these, companies, when they raised a significant round of funding, is when they went ahead and did a buyback. So I think the era of, ESOPs is coming back, and especially during the pandemic, when there are struggles, right? Cash flow struggles are there, business struggles are there, pivots are happening, and startups are really trying to
Correct.
manage during this situation. I think ESOP become a very important way to incentivize employees to continue, because there is value. There is value that is being created. The value may not be as of today, but 4 years down the line, there will certainly be value that even the investors will see. So that's really where ESOPs have become quite critical and quite important.
Understood, understood, ma'am. Last but not the least, why ESOPs? What are the benefits of granting ESOPs both for the startups as well as its employees?
So, for the employees, clearly the most important benefit that I see is the being able to partake in the ownership of the company, albeit very small. It's not like you hold a large chunk of the company, but
Correct.
the beauty of it is that you hold something which makes you connected to the company. You're not just an employee who's drawing salary month on month, and therefore the connection that employees feel with the founders or the corporation as such will be much closer, because you actually are a shareholder in the company, and therefore you are going to actually benefit if the company does well. So I think the biggest benefit is for the employees is basically partaking in the ownership of the company. For startup founders, I think it's the way to incentivize people to stay longer, right? I mean, a lot of times you may not be able to dole out high salaries, which are matching industry standards as far as the big companies are concerned.
Correct.
But what you're able to commit to them is the ability to cash out on ESOPs. And currently, because there has been a very good trend of some of the unicorns being able to give their employees fantastic cash outs, this is something that founders could definitely think about bringing ESOPs into the fray, and talking to their, the employees. Now, over here, I think a very important thing that the founders have to keep in mind is, when they start talking to their employees, it's important that you educate the employees on what ESOPs are. Because you and I both know what happens is that a lot of times, a non-lawyer, a layperson, will not understand the intricacies of what stock options are, right? So I think recently I saw that Razorpay, what they have done is that they've done a Q&A, broken down the entire concept of ESOPs for their employees, so the employees understand what is it that ESOPs mean? How can they, get it? What is the taxation treatment that is given? How are they going to benefit, so on and so forth? So, if the founders can spend some time in creating this kind of a, knowledge base for the employees, it'll benefit a lot. But I think this is the biggest benefit, being able to, create these kind of incentive models that go beyond your standard, bonuses and, all those kind of perks.
Right. Ma'am, are ESOPs also something that typically well-established companies also look at, or is this typically only something that startups and early stage companies would be interested in?
I think a world over, if you see a lot of very well established companies look at ESOPs, everybody gets ESOPs. So some of your largest tech companies, look at your Facebooks and Googles and all of those. Everybody has an ESOP and stock incentive plan. Now they may have different incentive plans for different set of employees. For instance, the CEO might get actual stock, while maybe a junior level employee may get phantom stock, because they will want to see the commitment that the employee has before giving that person shares in the company, because you and I know that Facebook, Google shares are
Correct.
extremely valuable, right?
Yes.
So they may have different incentive plans across the board for different sets of employees, but I think world over ESOPs are, given at even Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies are also rolling out ESOP plans, because I guess it's a tried and tested. In fact, for that matter, the startups is where ESOPs are new. In well-established companies, especially listed companies, right? Once you're listed on any of the stock exchanges,
Right.
you know what the value of the share is. Tomorrow, I
Right.
have X amount of shares. Tomorrow, the day after, the price of my shares is going up on the stock exchange, I can sell and make a windfall gain. So therefore, it becomes a fantastic benefit, because there's a lot more transparency and clarity. It's where the startups, which are, not yet public companies, not yet, gone into their IPOs, their share prices are still fluctuating, they're very early stage for anybody to determine how well they're doing. That's where ESOPs have continued to be a challenge, but I still continue to believe that ESOPs are a fantastic instrument of growth, and fostering ownership within your employee sets.
Right. Ma'am, one final question before we wrap up the session. And this is specifically for startup founders and CEOs. While rolling out ESOP plans, are there any specific set of rights that they should give or rather restrict, depending on what the use case is, to these stock options for the employees? For example, that, a stock held by an employee should not have these set of rights or should necessarily have these set of rights, something around that.
Absolutely. In fact, for that matter, your stock option plan will take care of these restrictions, and the stock option agreement typically will have these restrictions. One of the main, most important restriction is lack of transferability. So let's say today I acquire the right to apply for a share, and I do apply for a share. It will be subject to restrictions on transfer. So I, as a company, will ensure that either you transfer it back to the company or the founders, or any third party nominated by the founders, and not to anybody else at the employee's discretion. Why? Obviously, because you don't want your shares to be sold to competitors. So definitely these kind of restrictions, and it's a common knowledge that stock option shares are subject to transferability restrictions, and they can only be transferred to a certain set of entities and people, and the plans will take care of it. So that's really where I think founders need to talk to their lawyers, understand how a plan looks like, understand what the plan entails, and then start the conversation with the employees rather than the other way around. Right now, what is
Makes
happening
sense.
is founders are committing to certain things without understanding the modalities of the contractual
Correct.
arrangement, and then
Correct.
it comes down to the lawyers to be able to draft. I think you need to flip it around. First, talk to your lawyer, understand what stock options are all about, and then let's look at creating a plan and then talking to the employees. So that would be my
Absolutely.
advice.
Right. Thank you so much for this, ma'am. Thank you so much for your time. I'd like to let our viewers know, if you have any further questions other than the ones which were discussed in today's session, ma'am's contact details will be put below the video. Please feel free to reach out to ma'am, and ma'am will be very happy to be answering the questions over email. Thank you so much once again for joining the session, ma'am. I would also like to thank Lloyd for organizing this educational session today. Have a great day.
Thank you, Rishwan, and thank you, Lloyd. As usual, it was a fantastic session, and look forward to a lot more of these. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Likewise, ma'am. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot to our viewers as well for tuning in.
Bye.